Commission since 2006. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the GPAC meeting here in the city. And we're calling the meeting to order. And let's begin with a roll call around the room. And I will call out the names for just a moment. Okay. Oh, here we go. Okay. Yes, go ahead. You can check off. Okay. Nicholas Acevedo. Not here? Oh, okay. Hi. Okay. Dennis Baker. Curtis Black. Here. Ann Clougherty. Excused. Susan DeSantis. Arlene Greer. Oh, Jim Carlson. Okay. All right. Arlene Greer here. David Gooder. Lynn Hackman. Laird Hayes. Charles Globe. I saw you. There you are. Okay. Ruth Kobayashi. Scott Laidlaw. Okay. Katie Love. Anthony Maniscalchi. Excused. Thomas Meng. Excused. Jim Mosher. Perfect. Maxwell Pearson. Excused. Robert Rader. Absent. Nancy Scarborough. Seeing you here, Nancy. Thank you. Amber Snyder. Yes. Good. Debbie Stevens is excused. Christy Walker. Excused. Paul Watkins. Paul, there you go. Lori Williams. Okay.
And we also have our new member. Did you call her?
Oh, and our new member, Virginia Anders. Elmore. Virginia Anders Elmore. Welcome to our meeting. Welcome to the group. Thank you. It's lovely to have you. Thank you. Okay, let's get started on the agenda. And let's see. Little rusty being away for a month. Okay, public comments on non-agenda items.
I just want, at the last meeting, we talked about having Tony Petros come and talk about complete streets, the green streets, and that sort of thing. He'll be here for our November meeting.
Lovely. Okay, great. Okay, any other public comments? We'll bring it back to the days. Current business. Let's have a look at our minutes of the meeting of September 4th, the attachment number 1, the draft minutes. Are there any comments on the minutes? No? Okay. And then there are written comments that have been submitted that are additional materials received from Mr. Mosher. Okay. May I have, those would not be included in the minutes that we receive, but as comments on the agenda this evening. Correct, Mr. Mosher? Your comments. Ben, can you clarify those comments? Sorry? Clarify Mr. Mosher's comments relative to the minutes.
I'm not sure I understand the question. The comments are suggested corrections, amendments to the minutes.
Okay.
So I would move the approval of the minutes with those corrections and any other corrections other members might offer.
Okay. Any other corrections and a second? Okay, a second, Dennis Baker. All in favor? Aye. Oh, I'm not voting. I was not there. Opposed? Okay. Motion carries. Okay. Ben, will you give us an update from the City Council meeting of September 24th? Thank you.
All right. Thank you all for being here. And in case you hadn't noticed, it is just me with you this evening. We do not have consultant support, and I'll talk a little about that later. But that's kind of by design, and that's more related to the upcoming workshops. And basically wanted to preface the agenda while we have it up. So I'm going to give you an update of what transpired at council last week, and then we'll talk about the vision statement. We did provide an updated draft. We received some comments, including a favorable recommendation or support from Subcommittee Chair Debbie Stevens, who couldn't be here this evening. She thought that it's a great draft to start getting feedback from the community on, so I'm hoping that you all will agree with that. And then in terms of upcoming workshops, I wanted to, obviously, this work has a budget, so for this evening I wanted to give Dudek and Carrington West some reprieve so that we could just talk informally about these draft general plan goal topics and policy action ideas. Obviously this is a recorded meeting, so I can share feedback with them that's received directly while also giving them the video recording. But I did just want to go and let you know that we do not have Dudek or Carrington West here, so for better or for worse, you've got me for the evening. And then lastly, I'll just talk about what to expect in the near future. So in terms of what happened last week at Council, there were a few things, and I'll start with just talking about the housing element implementation. I wanted to put this on the agenda because I know it's something that's talked about frequently at the GPAC meetings. I wanted to put it up front so we could talk about it and then focus on the work program for the rest of the agenda. So the City Council did take action to amend the housing element to revise the narrative surrounding a Charter Section 423 vote. They also conducted second readings on ordinances to implement and establish housing opportunity overlays consistent with the housing element inventory of opportunity sites, and also conducted second reading on the objective design standards for multi-unit residential. Those ordinances would come into effect end of October. So just again wanted to share that is the action council took. That will make the city compliant in terms of our rezoning program. We've concurrently submitted to the Coastal Commission to make the amendments in the local coastal program that are complementary to effectuate the housing opportunity overlay sites that are in the coastal zone. We've received a incomplete notice and I've responded, and we are awaiting probably a second incomplete notice from coastal soon. So working our way through there. And then a couple of exciting things related to GPAC. Obviously, Virginia is here. She told me that she just got her letter today and she's already sworn in, so she's very eager to be here, and I'm glad that that's the case. The other member who was confirmed was Janine Padilla, and I know that the steering committee so aptly put Rita Goldberg as a backup. Obviously, we do have a couple more vacancies to fill, so we'll have to talk about that at the next steering committee meeting. And then lastly, which I think is pretty exciting, the council took the recommended action from staff on the bi-monthly report for the steering committee, which included expressing concurrence that they would be open to considering additional noise element work, which Mr. Mosier has been a fan of as the chair of the noise element subcommittee, and I think you all agreed at a prior meeting, I want to say the August meeting, that would be a good idea to pursue. So while it is not final until we get the contract amendment to council, they did not pull it and did not provide comments suggesting that was a bad idea. So I think that's a good thing. Ultimately, that is why the noise element subcommittee has not met for 2 months. We wanted to get to council to get the support, and then now we're working on getting a scope of work from Dudek, and we'll convene the noise subcommittee soon after to go over that scope of work. So some exciting things at council, and maybe not so exciting depending on your opinions of last week's meeting, but just wanted to share, and obviously can take questions if you have any at this time.
I do. Can you give us a little color on what the objective design standards provide the city?
Absolutely. Good question, Charles. Appreciate that. So as you know, there's endless amounts of state laws these days. A lot of them are aimed at providing certainty for housing projects. And what I mean by that is cities have had in the past the ability to have somewhat subjective design standards like complementary architecture to the neighborhood. Like, what does it actually mean? Because what's complementary to me might not be complementary to Jim Carlson as an architect or Philip Brown as a developer. You might think differently. And I want to make it clear that the objective design standards are aimed at eliminating that subjectivity and creating more certainty for developers who are proposing projects, to make sure that they are fitting in with the character we expect in Newport Beach. Also, it's important to note that some projects based on state law could come in by right, which is without any discretionary review. The city would not be able to apply any subjective design standards without the objective design standards in place. So you've heard about things like Builder's Remedy. You might have heard about Senate Bill number 6, which allows housing projects on commercial sites that are not near industrial in certain areas that are appropriate for it. And those could go in without any discretionary review, which would then eliminate the city's ability to comment on the design. So by having these objective design standards in place, it's really a protection that helps the city maintain good design and gets us the quality of design we expect. Does that help? Is that good, Charles? Yes. Okay. Yes. Got it. Thank you. And then let's make sure we use the mic too, because I got good comments from the sound guy last time that we did a good job. It's not on.
There. Okay. There? Okay. Ben, could you fill us in on what the communications are with HCD related to the amendments to the housing element, the certified housing element, what kind of a response we've received or when we anticipate receiving a response? What kind of communications are taking place?
Sure. So thankfully, the city has a good relationship with HCD staff, and we coordinated early on to see how the amendment might affect our certification status. We did, as part of the council's action, thank you for bringing this up, as part of the council's action, we did report that HCD reviewed the amendment and deemed it as not jeopardizing the city's compliance status. So now that we have the adopted amendment to the housing element, we'll be transmitting that to HCD as an adopted version, and they'll be providing another letter to deem the adopted version in compliance. But everything that we've done up until now, we've gotten no hesitation from HCD to say that it is not going to jeopardize our compliance.
May I ask another question? And it has to do with the housing legislation that the governor signed that addresses the builder's remedy. As I understand it, it put some constraints around what the developers could achieve in terms of the density bonus. Is that an accurate way of describing it?
To be honest, I'm not fully versed in what those laws did. I know several components that strengthened it. I'm not familiar with it affecting how density bonus applies. I was under the impression that actually you'd get more benefit out of density bonus through the changes that were made. But would be happy to look into that. I know there's a lot of legal briefings that have been going out about it.
Okay, I think that would be useful. My understanding is that it placed some limitations on how many time, well, first of all, it did increase or decrease the amount of affordable units that had to be included in order to get the density bonuses, but then also set some parameters about how many times you could double or increase density based on the projects.
Yeah, there's also a provision to do 3 times the maximum general plan density. So there's definitely some things that went into play in AB 1886 and AB 1893 that strengthen builders remedy significantly. Again, I'm not familiar with anything that downgrades the ability to use density bonus, but we can look into that.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any other? Yes, Mr. Mosier.
Yeah, I have a closely related question. I think, I can't recall if it was a presentation at the council meeting or not. We've heard one of the threats of the builder's remedy, should the city for some reason fall into that, would be the possibility of major development in areas that are zoned for single-family residences. And there seem to be 2 conflicting provisions, one allowing projects of 10 units or less with no affordable requirement, and another allowing builders to go to 3 times over the normal density. So do you understand whether the limit in a single-family area would be a triplex, because that would be 3 times the city's zoning for it, or whether 10 units would be allowed, and in either of those cases where objective design standards have any application to them?
It's an interesting question. I think it's still being sorted out because there are other laws in play that may have implications too. Like there have been, I think, 3 ADU laws that also passed, and we've gotten some correspondence or some comments from HCD that we should be allowing 4 units now on a single unit zoned lot, because we should be allowing 1 of each unit type. So there may even be some questions about what is the maximum allowable density under the general plan. So I think there's some things that remain to be seen as far as how those interplay, but I think your question's well put.
I'm new to this, but there's been a lot of new apartment buildings and new condos and stuff that have been built in the last several years. Are they already sold and rented out? I mean, if they're going to put all these additional units in, maybe the price will come down just because they can't sell them.
I mean, well, apartments are rented out; they wouldn't be sold.
Well,
but
maybe.
I know what you mean. But I would say that that's an interesting thing and something that plays into the larger conversation about private market. At some point, you can build until no one wants to do it anymore because it doesn't make sense. Because land values are high here, you can't attract the rents that you want to attract or need to attract because now the market's oversaturated. There's more competition, so there's a lot of things at play. I can't comment on the vacancy rates of our apartments in town, but I would have to imagine they're probably lower than most areas, meaning they're probably pretty well rented out. Otherwise, you wouldn't have people trying to pursue projects as much as they are in the airport area, especially.
So here's what I hope is an easy one for you. Of the 3,000 or so units that we've entitled over the last couple of years, how many building permits have been issued?
Gosh, that's tough.
And building permits.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, no, it's tough because I don't manage the building permit
I'll
counter,
bet
but
none.
I would say no. I think we recently did issue building permits for
The condos on
1401 Quail. Yeah,
the condos.
Yeah.
That makes sense. But the condos approved at the car wash, no building permit, right?
no, yeah.
That should tell you something about the builder's desire to build. The entitlement was very important, but nobody's rushing to build between construction cost, interest.
Well, that's again playing into private market factors, and I think that's important to recognize. All right, anything else before I give it back to the chair?
Just anecdotally, because I have a client that's in the middle of what we're talking about right now with a very, very high density project. One, there isn't good data on vacancy rates. They actually don't know, which is crazy. And there is so much confusion in working with the city on what they can do that, maybe for those that want to limit the amount of housing going on, that's a good thing, because it's very, very difficult for them to figure out the right path. But they don't know what the current vacancies are because nobody shares it. Each developer is holding tightly to, success or failure of the project.
Okay, thanks for the comment. The chair, if you'd like to.
All right, we're back to the agenda. Ben, thank you for the update and opening and basically providing all the information on all those questions. Okay, item C on the agenda is the vision statement updated draft, attachment number 2 memo with enclosures on page 17 of your report, director's reports, through page 37. As of the September 4th regular meeting, the GPAC voted to allow DUDAC and city staff to revise the draft vision statement and bring it back to GPAC's review. Since the meeting, DUDAC and city staff have coordinated on responsive updates, and attachment number 2 includes the updated draft. As a reminder, this remains a draft until the City Council adopts it. As such, it can be updated as we proceed into Phase 2 of the General Plan update process. Ben, do you have anything to add to that?
No, you stole my thunder, but I'll
Oh,
just
I am
no.
sorry.
that's
I won't
okay.
do that
I'm
next
kidding.
time.
I would just add that we did receive some written comments. I know we got some from Committee Member Mosier on the vision statement, as well as from Vision Statement Subcommittee Chair Stevens. Again, I think she expressed support for the current version we have to start moving forward and getting community feedback. I was also informed that I missed an email from Committee Member DeSantis. It seemed to have gotten flagged as spam because it was a link to a shared document. So I'd be happy to distribute that to the full GPAC as additional materials after this meeting, as I understand it. And you're welcome to provide additional context since you weren't able to see it. But I wanted to just let you all know we did receive some comments. And I think that at this point in time, Committee Member Watkins provided comments on the draft goal and policy topics, not the vision statement. As far as the vision statement is concerned, I think city staff feels we're in a good spot with it, and we'd be looking for GPAC's receiving and filing of this version to start sharing it for reactions from the community. So that's what we're looking for with this item.
Comments? Ruth Kobayashi?
Thank you. Good evening. Is it too late then if there's some additional things that a comment to make, or is it later in the process, maybe after public input?
You're welcome to make comments. As
But
said.
I don't want to slow down the process. You know, I don't want that to be
No.
problematic because there might be an opportunity after public, you know, when you put it out to the public, then maybe I could do it then.
I mean, it's at your pleasure, honestly. You can make comments this evening for consideration, but again, this is kind of a living and breathing vision statement. Hopefully it's close enough to where you won't have to materially change it along the way, but if you have wordsmithing suggestions, I don't see an issue with providing those. I think what would slow it down is if you said, this is terrible, let's restart. So.
No, but like I red circled a couple of words here or there. Would it be more efficient if I just email it to you?
Maybe
Because
just
I didn't do that before and I should have, so that's on me, but
maybe for the benefit of the
Yeah.
GPAC, if you don't just read over them briefly,
Yeah.
that way there's no.
so
How many do you have? I guess is it a lot?
4 or 5.
I would just read them into the record just so we know kind of
Okay.
what they are.
So would you like me to do that now?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So on section 2.3, it says a harbor, bay, and beaches, and then a couple sections later, in 3.2, it just says harbor, beaches, and a coastline. So I thought that just looked a little bit odd that it was kind of a similar sentence, but done differently, so that's an easy one. And then in section 4, in the blue, the title, Facilitate Public Safety. Facilitate sounds so passive to me, and public safety is such a big priority in our city, as I'm sure in many cities. I would rather see a more active word like prioritize or something like that. If there's a better word, that's fine. But facilitate sounded a bit too passive for me. And then in 4.2, national leaders in emergency response and preparedness to safeguard the community. I think that's a great sentence. I just wanted to reference being on the safety committee. I don't know that we address that. So our next meeting, I would love for us to address some of that. We seem to focus more on preparedness as opposed to emergency response, staffing, quality, things like that. And then in section 5, where it talks about technology, as an example, we're adding new technology in the police department, our city is, and I would think that public safety should be included in this. A city that embraces, prepares, somewhere in there, I think public safety should be reflected because that's really critical in modern policing. And then in section C, celebrate art, culture, and history. 6.1, the city representing the common language and shared experiences that exist between all cultures. I don't really know what that means. I thought that sounded a little bit esoteric, and I'm not sure why it was written that way. And then 6.4, and this is not a criticism, this is just a question, because I remember we had a lot of discussion last time about including its early foundation of tribal nations, and you would probably remember because you took the notes, but where did we land on that last time? Because I know there was a lot of discussion on that. And then I think this is, I'm down to the last two, and that is Section 7 and 7.1, a secure economy. So an economy to me means the economic environment that we live in, often at a national level. We can't necessarily control that, so I just wondered if something like financial management might be a better term than a secure economy. And then, did I say 2.4, equitable access to natural resources? Okay. Equitable access to natural resources that offers recreation and refuge for all residents. So I find that to be two things. In the spirit of some of the things that Mr. Watkins mentioned in later documents, that sounds a little bit like Sacramento speak to me. It also, to me, is redundant because at the end of the sentence it says for all residents. For all residents means all residents of any stripe. So the use of equitable to me doesn't sound to be helpful. And that's all I had. And that was a lot. So thank you all for indulging me.
I just wonder whether the equitable access is again, a nod to Sacramento, but it helps us with our environmental justice aspect that we're required to have. So that may have been why.
Good point. And then I guess just to address one thing, I think on the tribal component, I know there were some who were unaware of the tribal foundations and history in Newport Beach. I'm not saying you weren't, but I know that I remember Committee Member Baker commented on tours that he leads where he talks about tribal history. And I think one thing that I mentioned is we do get inquiries from 2 tribal nations that say that they have potential tribal cultural resources here in Newport Beach. So I think that they're here, and if there was a strong desire to strike tribal from the vision statement or the values here, I think that's fine. But I didn't get that sense at the last meeting. That's all.
Okay, other comments? Susan, did you? Okay.
I do have one related to some comments that were made by Jim Mosier, and whether we are, it has to do with the vision statement updated draft. It's the 4th paragraph down. I mean, Jim is taking issue with whether or not we in fact have guiding principles as part of this draft. And one that he references in particular has to do with when conflicts exist, Newport Beach places the interests of residents first, businesses second, and visitors last. As a guiding principle, could we have some conversation about that, which was part of the previous vision statement, but is not part of this one?
Ben, can you comment on that?
It would be at the GPAC's pleasure to talk about that if you wanted to somehow suggest that gets incorporated. I mean, we'd be happy to make a revision.
I'd like to just, at the next vision statement meeting of the subcommittee, have them consider Jim's comments and see if they want to incorporate them into it. I'm not on that committee, but I have a feeling that these are things that weren't considered, and if given them, they would consider them. So that's how I'd suggest not be done here at the full committee.
So I think maybe a suggestion would be, if I may, because I think what we're looking for at this point is that this is good enough to start windowing with the community for additional input. So my suggestion would be that maybe after the workshops, because this will be discussed as part of the workshops, maybe we bring it back to the vision statement subcommittee with the comments from Mr. Mosier, with the comments from Susan, and the comments from Ruth, and that way we could sort of workshop it all at the same time with the subcommittee. So if that would be, I think, a good approach.
I think that sounds great. Is everyone in agreement?
Only if there are no substantive additions or changes, because then we would be asking the community to relate to something that's not, I mean, for what Ruth suggested, these are minor. I don't think that would be a game changer that if we took them out to the community and got a response. But if there's something that we didn't even have in here, then that would be something I think that should be included so that the community could react to it.
I assumed, and maybe I'm wrong, that this document was created after the meetings of the subcommittee, and then Dudek worked with the staff to create the document that we're looking at here, incorporating everyone's ideas and input. Is that true, Ben?
Yeah, that is correct. But again, I think we recognize and realize things at different times, and maybe we didn't think of something before, we think of it now, and that's perfectly fine. But I think to Steering Committee Chair Gardner's point, if there's something that's completely missing in here and we want to add it in, I think that should be a consideration of your discussion this evening.
Okay, perfect. All right. Other comments? Mr. Mosher?
Thank you, Arlene. First of all, on that last point, I could be misremembering, but so the other members of the GPAC who are not on the Vision Subcommittee, I am, are not getting a misimpression. My recollection is the Vision Subcommittee has not met actually in person or even virtually for many months, and what Ben is referring to is a email request for comments on this. So he just kind of received and collated individual comments from members. The committee as a whole has not met to discuss whether those thoughts were good or bad. So my comments this evening, first of all, on the agenda, it's reminding us that this is a draft until the City Council approves it or adopts it. Is that meant to be a statement that this is going to be separately submitted to the City Council, or is that just meaning when the entire general plan is adopted, it will be adopted with that by the City Council? Is it on a separate track or just with the whole thing?
I'm generally referencing the whole document, but as part of the General Plan Update Steering Committee bi-monthly report, we did report out about the vision statement and provided a link to the materials. So whether they saw it or not, I don't know. It's a big package to go through, as you know, but I would say that I was referencing the end-all sort of adoption of everything. So at that point in time, that's when they would decide whether it was appropriate or not.
Yeah. I have some concern that the vision statement is not, if we were using this to guide the development of the general plan, I'm not sure that it's comprehensive enough. As an obvious example, I don't think this mentions anywhere in it the airport, which was featured in our current vision statement. So it doesn't express an attitude towards that. And I'm sure there's many other things that are not covered in it. And perhaps it's not the intent to cover all of them, but I don't think you could deduce what our attitude towards the airport is from this. And then second, reading the vision statement, on the way here I was thinking, this is describing, looking back, Newport Beach from 2050. Could it not be describing, is there anything in here that's not actually describing Newport Beach 2025? Is this not just a description of how we currently view ourselves? And since the general plan is a plan for physical development of the city, would it be helpful in the vision statement to kind of highlight things that we hope or envision will be different in 2050 than they are in 2025? And things we hope or envision will be the same as they are now, and maybe the public would then have a better grasp of what we're trying to accomplish, and we as well. I assume there's some things we want to be different and some we want to be the same, and I cannot guess from this statement what our attitude towards that is. So as I said at the last meeting and voted against it, I really think it needs more work, and I really would hope the Vision Subcommittee could actually have a discussion of it. Thank you.
I just would also suggest, what is to take the tenor of the committee as a whole? Do you as a whole feel it needs to go back to the Vision Committee for more work, or do you feel like this is adequate with some of the changes that have been suggested to go out to public, knowing that it will then come back and be revised probably extensively?
I was under the impression at the last meeting that it would go back to the Vision Committee, and so maybe I misunderstood that, but I thought we were going to have one more meeting after this. Did I not get that right?
Yeah, no, that was not the vote that carried the day.
Okay.
No.
Ben, is this the email that you sent out on the 17th of July asking for everyone for their input?
And yeah, if I could comment. So Mr. Mosier is correct that we did not hold a in-person or virtual meeting. I see. Sorry, you're looking at the sun's in your eyes. I'm sorry.
Most everyone gave input except for two.
We got a decent amount of input the first time on the framework. I think the second time we sent out the actual draft, it was a little less, but we did get comments from subcommittee members. That is something we discussed early on as making efficient for people and kind of avoiding meetings where possible. If we could send something you review at your own pace and provide comments, then I could collate them, as Mr. Mosier said. That was the approach that we decided to take. And I did work with Chair Stevens on that approach as well in lieu of a meeting. So there was not an intention to bring this back to the vision statement subcommittee after the last GPAC meeting. Rather, we would make some changes and bring it back to the GPAC for review as we're doing today. I would stress that again, I think there would be a natural and good opportunity to come back and revisit this after the workshops occur if we were comfortable sharing this as just a draft for reaction to the community and see kind of what feedback we get. And then take all that feedback, take Mr. Mosier's feedback, take all the feedback that we've received from other committee members this evening. I'd get the feedback from Susan, I'd get it out of the ether of my email, and then also take the comments from Ruth, and we'd all bring that together to the vision statement subcommittee for another pass at this. I think that's the best approach, but again, I would defer to the GPAC majority.
Just in supporting what you said, Ben, it sounds like a good idea, especially since we're looking for that impact from the community, and this is a good talking start with the community for the workshop. Do you all agree with that? And especially since our chair of the committee was in agreement that, and everyone did receive the opportunity to offer input from the committee, and most everyone except for two, I couldn't get my email working well enough, but everyone had great ideas, and I was pretty satisfied with that. And Debbie is very satisfied with this. And we want to get it going to the point that we can have our workshops and receive some input from the public. And it's not such a bad idea to incorporate everything that we heard here before it goes out into the community for the workshop. And then after we have the input from the workshop, have DUDEC, would they coordinate all of the input and the information they receive from this meeting, and then have a committee meeting before the next meeting of GPAC?
Well,
Or a future meeting
getting
of
ahead of
GPAC.
ourselves here with
Right,
the workshops.
after the
but
workshops.
yes, and I think just to clarify, the idea would be to leave it as is today, but I would make the one change that was recommended by two members about, there's a comment about something like the city has the potential to become, and that's something I actually struck a long time ago. I don't know how it made it back in there, but the city is currently exceptional. We want to maintain that exceptional status, so I would make that one change. Otherwise, I would recommend keeping this the same, and then after the workshops, take into consideration all the feedback from the committee members as part of the vision statement subcommittee's meeting. So that's the process that I was recommending, just to be clear.
Madam Chair, do we need a motion to pursue what
Yes.
Ben has just outlined for us as a path? So moved.
And all in favor? Aye? Oh,
You need discussion.
okay. I'm sorry. Early call for the vote. Comments? Dennis?
Yeah, normally you have discussion before you vote.
I'm sorry.
Just vision statements and mission statements that are one of the most difficult things I've ever seen in all the organizations I've ever been associated with. You wordsmith them to death. What would help me, not on this specific thing, and we could go ahead and vote on it, but what would help me is if, Ben, if you would work backwards, like all the way from when it's to the council, then, what is the step before that, and the step before that, step for that. I think that would offer some reassurance that, you know, there's different opportunities to jump in. I hear some kind of worried, like, oh, this is our last chance or something like that, which I don't think it is. So, as I said, that could be after the vote. It isn't specific to the vote.
Okay, other comments? Mr. Motion? Oh,
Again,
Virginia?
I kind of agree with Jim Mosier in the sense that in some ways it feels like, you know, we want to kind of keep Newport Beach the same. We like what we have. We want to keep it the same. But at the same time, given some things that are coming our way, whether it be more our increase in population because of all the building that needs to get done, or whether the sea level rise is going to become serious by 2050. It just seems like maybe we even have to have some professionals come in and give us some guidelines about what are we really looking at the need, what will be our needs in 2050. I'm not sure that that's even possible, but we might, I don't know. It sounds like we're trying to keep it the same, and it seems like we like what we have, and I just want to make sure that we've added whatever we do need to in thinking of 2050. Does this make sense?
Yes, it does. Thank you. Mr. Mosher? Before we call for the vote.
Yeah.
Or any other comments, too, after Mr. Mosher?
Yeah,
Mr. Mosher, your comments.
I have a question. The workshops will be the next agenda item. There was concern about the vision statement. I could not tell from the agenda packet, is the vision statement going to be something presented for the public to comment on? Or are we talking about they will be commenting just on the elements, and then we'll, without showing them what our vision statement is, and we'll be revising it based on their feedback about the elements that they're looking at? Or are we going to ask for public input on the vision statement in the workshops?
Right, so the workshops themselves are still being workshops, so to speak, in terms of putting the content together. I believe the current intention of city staff and our consultant is to share the vision statement in some form. I'm not sure if it would just be literally putting the draft out for review or having segments of it for people to react to, such as the guiding values and priorities. But there is an intention to share, and I think that's why we want to make sure that at this time, this vision statement is at least far enough along to share and get reaction from the community on. And then again, bringing that back for a more comprehensive review on all the feedback at the vision statement subcommittee after the workshops. But I will be going into the workshop format and a little bit more of the workshops on the next agenda item.
And just in addressing what Mr. Mosher had mentioned about the vision statement and the airport and that being covered, I just remember something about that being covered in the safety, I believe, of the workshops. So that could even come in later when everything is finalized, not finalized, digested and added to this whole process after the workshops.
Yeah, and I would just reemphasize that the vision statement is intended to be a broad component of the general plan that should be applicable across the board. And so there were comments received when the vision statement was distributed initially regarding things that may be more appropriate for the land use element or for the safety element. So there is mentioning about transportation network and different things that foster business and local economy. I think some of that does cover the airport, but more specifically to safety in the safety draft goal topics and policy action ideas, which were distributed as part of the agenda for the next item. It does talk a little bit about airport pollution and air quality. So there is the airport discussed, but it's not in the vision statement by name.
Right. Okay.
Excuse me.
All right, next.
Go ahead, Scott.
I just have one.
Am I missing
I mean,
Scott?
if it's possible this time, I would. I'm comfortable moving forward with the motion, but in the very first paragraph, and I think this relates back to something that Jim alluded to, the very last sentence to me is not really. It says Newport Beach will have the potential to become an exceptional city. I would say that we should advise that even in this motion, under this motion, that Newport Beach will continue to excel as an exceptional city, or something like that.
Thanks for finding, that's the one I was referencing, that I was surprised to see it in there again, because I struck that when I first saw the draft, because I knew that wouldn't fly.
So has that been revised?
It has, but it just didn't get carried over into this version, so I apologize.
Okay, thank you.
No, I apologize.
It's in Debbie Stevens' comments that you all received.
That's what I'm saying.
That
Multiple
Newport
people
Beach
caught on
is
to
an
that,
exceptional city. So, okay. So that will be, those comments, Debbie's comments will be added. Mr. Mosher's, Ruth, Susan, Susan, Mr. Mosher, Debbie Stevens, and anything that Paul Watkins had in there as well.
Just to clarify for the maker of the motion, we would be revising or carrying forward the revision to remove Newport Beach will have the potential to become an exceptional city and instead make it. It is currently and will maintain that status. But beyond that, we would not be changing this. We would be coming back to consider the additional comments received. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
Right. That's my understanding. Is that everyone's understanding? Charles?
So I can't support this motion. I think that even though Debbie Stevens appears to have approved what she's provided here, she doesn't have the benefit, or she didn't when she wrote that, of Jim's comments, of Susan's comments that are lost somewhere, and all the various things that were heard tonight. I think the best thing to do is to send it back to the committee and let them consider all of those things and make a recommendation to us whether or not those things get added or subtracted. And I'm not hearing from Ben that it's necessary that this vision statement makes the workshop whole. So let's get it right.
Ben, your response to that staff time and staff-wise and our timeline.
I mean,
how does that work?
I'll say again, I said it before, I'm a public servant. I work for you all, so I take your direction on this particular instance. I think that would be a backtrack in terms of schedule, although if that's the strong sentiment across the board, then of course we would take your direction. Yeah, so if that's your direction, we'd gladly go that way.
Okay, and that could be in the form of another motion, and we could vote on the first motion, correct?
Yes.
Would that be proper? Well, we've got a motion out there, and we're taking comments, so, okay, go ahead.
Yes, it would be a substitute motion if Mr. Klob wants to make a substitute motion. And maybe now is an important time to go through the process backwards. Because it sounds like if we do not take action on this, that there's going to be some ripple effect as far as scheduling goes, and that would concern me. But so two things. The first thing is if Mr. Klob wants to make a substitute motion, he can, and then that would go first.
Okay. All right. So, pardon? Katie?
And maybe, this may be too much, but one of the things that I see in here that we don't discuss at all, we talk a lot about the culture and the health of the environment and things. We don't talk about anything about the health of, like, health care, and maybe that's just my little siloed perspective, but I wonder if we want to address anything about the fact that we need access to reliable health care. It seems like we cover everything except the actual health of people.
I think Dennis has made his point. Is there you want to make an
Yes, I move that we send all of these comments back to the committee for them to consider and make a recommendation to the full body.
Second.
Comments? Mr. Mosher?
Yeah, looking ahead to the next item, it says the first workshop would be November 13th, and if the vision statement is simply being kind of a receive and file to the workshops and not the core of the workshop, we will be meeting again as a group, I hope, in November before the first workshop. So I don't see how this throws a monkey wrench into the schedule. So I will be supporting the motion.
So, Ben, can we come back to this in November and still be able to move forward with workshops without the vision statement until it's finalized?
Yeah, the critical path today is determining whether the GPAC is comfortable with the workshop dates at the very least, and making sure that we move forward in planning and advertising. We don't have to get content out ahead of time. So we can come back in November with the revised GPAC, with the vision statement for GPAC consideration.
Okay.
Mr. Black has a comment.
I think just to summarize, I'm on the vision statement subcommittee, and I think, like, to summarize, I think it is important enough to get it right to where I personally don't have a strong point of view on, I think it'd be okay to push this out and to comment on it later, but it's definitely clear that there are people on the committee who are voicing opinions that haven't been fully reflected, and I think, if we can do it before, if we can have a quick meeting before the workshops without pushing the dates, I have no problem supporting that. I think it could be an okay path forward.
Can that be arranged, Ben? A meeting to incorporate all this information that we have in addition to the meeting, have the committee meet, and redraft some of the vision draft that's already been presented here today, come back with a more complete document, and have it ready for our November meeting?
Yes, staff can definitely work with the vision statement subcommittee to do that. I would make one comment just stating that if we were to completely restructure, because I know some of the other comments from Mr. Moser were talking about maybe the guiding priorities or values not being appropriate to cover the entire swath of the general plan. But if we started to really retool this, I think that would potentially cause concern from staff standpoint in terms of scheduling and also budget. We have revised the vision statement based on the prior GPAC meeting and the iterations and comments received from the vision statement subcommittee previously. So just wanted to share that while it may directly impact schedule, it could impact our budget, which is not necessarily of your concern, but something that I'm just being mindful of as I want to make sure that we're giving you the best service that we can. So with that, I would say yes, it is possible. It's going to be a lift, I'm not going to lie to you, but we can definitely make it happen.
Okay. And since we have so many members here this evening, and they're looking at the vision statement, and some are not in agreement, and we're going to have less of that in a next meeting when we have a final draft, that you've, over and above what we have right now, and you've incorporated all the information and the input from the others. Okay, all right. So we have a motion, Charles Globe, and who provided the second? Was it Dennis Baker? And any more comments before we call for the vote?
So what happens with Paul's motion?
Yeah, that's what I'd like to know. What would you like? Ben, what is the process here?
I'll accept Charles' motion as a substitute motion. If that's required. I'm no Robert's Rules expert, but I accept it.
All right. All right, so we don't have a motion any longer, and there was a second. So we have a substitute motion. Let's call for the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
As it's been presented? Not in favor? Okay, thank you. Motion passed with one exception. Motion passed with one exception, Mr. Rader. Okay. Moving on to the next item, which is item D. Upcoming workshop. Ben, you go ahead and take the floor on this.
All right.
I don't want to steal your thunder.
No, and I was just kidding with you earlier. I like to practice levity when we can. So I wanted to share with the full GPAC, again, we don't have Dudek or Kearns West here to provide a little more information, but wanted to go ahead and share out the dates and potential topics for these workshops. And as you can see, there are generally 2 topics for each workshop. As you can probably imagine, it's very challenging to find dates in Newport Beach that are not already impacted. So I'm very well aware that the December 4th is a regularly scheduled GPAC meeting date that typically would fall on the first Wednesday of the month. However, if it were appropriate, staff would probably recommend GPAC go dark as a full committee in December. We could still have subcommittee meetings. If we needed to have a meeting, we could always reschedule the GPAC meeting. Although once you get past the first week of December, I start to get concerned about holidays. So just wanted to put these dates out there. If there are any concerns with any of them, we'd be happy and want to hear about them. To clarify, there have been no rooms scheduled at this point in time, although I know they are available, and that's just because, again, we want to make sure that the GPAC is on board with pursuing these dates as workshop dates. I've been told by Kirsten West that 6 weeks is a great amount of time in terms of lead time to start advertising. We do have a very good advertising plan that the Phase 2 outreach plan contemplated. It'll include video advertisements from working with the Public Information Manager's office, and also Stu News ads, Daily Pilot ads. So there'll be a good push for these workshops, in other words, but nothing has been set in motion until we kind of get a general consensus that this is a good approach from the GPAC at this evening's meeting. Sorry, I'm kind of looking at mine and looking at yours at the same time.
As far as the workshops themselves, if they're not here, could I suggest that you try to locate them geographically around and not just have, say, all on the west side or all on the east side?
Yeah, that's a good suggestion. Right now, we've been trying to target the community room just because we think it's a neutral sort of territory. There was a consideration to look at maybe doing Harbor Bay and beaches at Marina Park. I don't know if that's too much of a lift. It just seems fitting. I'm hoping it's available. I haven't gotten confirmation back yet, but I thought that would be a nice fit for that meeting. So moving into workshop format, again, this is a possible workshop format, but we're looking to do a visioning activity, and that's where the vision statement does come into play. We want to get some feedback from the community, leverage all the people that we can to sort of provide input on the vision statement. So we will definitely work to get that in good shape before the workshop to make sure we can share that out. There'll be a presentation. It might vary based on the workshop topic, but as discussed at previous meetings, we'll make sure that whoever is presenting is qualified and can answer questions appropriately if there are questions. And then we'll have breakout activities that look at sort of aligning the vision statement's guiding values towards generating ideas that relate to each of the elements topics. So you'll see that we have aligning generated ideas with draft goals to facilitate policy discussion and revisions to the draft goals. So when we say draft goals, those are goal topics. These are not goals that are being solidified this evening, and I want to clarify based on comments that were received. I know it's a little confusing, but the format of the document that's an attachment is simply goal topics or topics that we would envision having a goal for, and then the policy action ideas beneath them are how do we achieve that goal. So that would be the sort of workshopping done with the community is here's a goal that we heard is important for the community through the Phase 1 outreach effort. And we want to hear from you if these action steps are appropriate. If not, what else could we do to achieve those goals?
Do you see, when you say your breakouts, they're going to be tables?
Yes, different
and
stations.
Will staff be recording minutes on those?
Yeah, staff and Kirsten West and Dudek would have the ability to record notes.
So I'm slightly confused if we're going to be revising the vision statement, but the first meeting in November is related or presenting recreation and natural resources. Are we going to present the vision statement as well as the guiding? So it will be the
at every meeting
initial topic, and then okay.
At every workshop, the vision statement would be presented. I think that's important to share. So thank you for the clarification, and that's why it's so important to get it right. So I totally. Although, like I said, it will take some lifting to get it done, I agree and understand that it's very important. So I appreciate that.
Thank you for that clarification, Ben.
Let's see. So moving right along, and again, I hope that it's clear that these are not draft goals. As was pointed out, my memo talked about draft goals being formalized along with policies and brought back through the subcommittees. That's not what these are. These are simply comments that have been reflected through outreach of Phase 1 that have been translated into a topic for a goal to consider. And then further, the policy action ideas are how we've heard that we can achieve those goals. And that's what we'll be looking for the community to react to. So I think I've talked about this without moving my slides, so that's not very great. But as I said, we did take all the input from the GPAC subcommittees, the steering committee, and the community to shape the attachments you have before you. We strongly believe that the Phase 1 input has informed these draft goal topics and policy action ideas, and those will help facilitate a better discussion at the workshops with respect to what the community's desires are and how they feel we can achieve, how you all feel we can achieve those goals. And ultimately, as I said, the input from that engagement exercise would help tweak and edit the goal topics into actual draft goals and the policy action ideas into actual policies, and that would be shared back through the subcommittees and back to the GPAC for a formal review. And again, I've kind of covered a lot of this just by talking, but really these workshop goal topics and policy action ideas are being brought to the full GPAC, not just in the interest of time, because these are important to make sure we can start moving these along as well, but also because they're very overarching into other areas of the general plan, particularly coastal resilience. I know resilience was brought up very early on through sustainability conversation, and what does that mean for the community? And as we've talked about, resilience policies will be folded throughout the general plan where appropriate. So we think it's very important to bring these documents to the full GPAC for consideration rather than going through the subcommittees first in this case and making sure we get the full GPAC to have the ability to look at them. So I actually have a slide for every single goal topic and policy action idea, but just for the sake of time, I just pulled out one from each of the different topics or from each of the different subject areas for reference, just as an example to show how it works. So under the natural resources category, there's a goal topic that talks to ecosystems that are connected and expansive. The question to the community would be, do you resonate with that goal topic? And how do you think that we could achieve that goal? And that's where the policy action ideas sort of come into play. We'd start to get a reaction on if that is something that the community resonates with, or are there additional ideas that can be had to achieve that goal? Same thing on recreation. So again, just presenting a goal topic. That's not what the goal would end up being at the end of the day. If there was feedback, we could change that. But then also, again, asking the question of how do we achieve that goal? Same thing on coastal resilience, presenting a goal topic, and then there's the policy action ideas that would help us achieve it. And lastly, on safety, again, the same format. So I know it's a little confusing to think about this, but again, it's presenting a topic and getting a reaction on how do we achieve that goal that is the subject of that topic. And again, I have one slide for every single one if you want to dive into those. Given the amount of interest on the vision statement, I'm a little worried to go through each and every one. But I'd be happy to do that if you'd like to, or if you would like to call any of them up, I have them all in the back pocket of this presentation. But again, I would just stress that these are simply to continue a conversation, and we can wordsmith them later on, as long as there's nothing that is completely tone deaf. And I know that we got comments from Mr. Watkins. We'd be glad to revise some of the wording to be more in line with what the GPAC wishes, but just wanted to again stress that this is not a policy or goal document that is being solidified this evening. Thank you.
Yeah, Madam Chair.
Mr. Watkins.
Thank you. Over the weekend, I took a look at the recreation and natural resources element, and the kind of reaction I had was that that some of the language seemed a little bit. I think it might be softened a little bit. We're an island in a blue state. We have a lot of dictates from Sacramento, and I think we need to be compliant with those. But I don't think we need necessarily to have some of the language in that element that in goals and policies that has been suggested. So here's where I'm confused. If we wait until November 13th, when the Recreation and Natural Resources workshop would take place, and what is presented to the public in advance of that workshop is what's now before us, I think that the language that I believe ought to be softened would appear unsoftened. And that's a little bit of concern to me. So the confusion I have is how do we get, if there's any merit to a couple of the comments that I've made, and there may not be any merit to them, how do we get those kind of changed before it goes out to the public? Because I think as prepared now, it might send a little bit of a harsher message that we're willing to bow to Sacramento more than it seems to me personally that we should. A couple of examples, for example. And I checked with Nancy a little bit, but unless we're told that we can't drill anymore, our city, I believe, was $1 to $2 million a year that we have from a revenue source of oil drilling, slant drilling into the ocean, I believe, from West Newport area, for example. I'm not sure of that, but I'm not sure I want to come out strongly and say that the goal is to get rid of all of our oil and gas revenue sources. And that's, I think, said perhaps somewhere in here that's there. Also, dunes are fine. Dunes are fine in Martha's Vineyard and Nantucket, but a lot of folks, I think, in Newport, particularly the 100,000 people coming in on the 4th of July weekend, want to go to the sandy shore and throw a frisbee and have a picnic and have a family experience and not have dunes as we've seen in other parts of the country. And so to indicate that we favor the development of dunes, and yes, I understand that berms are necessary for the infrequent flooding that we have. There's no question in my mind about that. But I'm not sure that we want to encourage as a policy the dunes throughout our beachfront communities. Again, I could be wrong on that. So my confusion is, if we're going with a November 13th workshop on this particular element, do we want to present language that, at least in this person's mind, may need a little bit of work or softening, or do we just give the public what is presented by our consultants and then at that time say, hey, maybe there ought to be some wordsmithing here and there?
I think that this is, your comments are exactly why this is not a bad approach, because I would absolutely disagree with you on dunes, say, and if we were both in the workshop, we would be having that discussion. So I think the critical thing is to say, hey, these are ideas. This is not GPAC saying this is what should be. These are ideas that GPAC says we need to discuss. And that takes away a lot of the concerns to say, we're not pushing you to do dunes, but we're saying many people think dunes are a good idea for coastal resilience. What do you think? So that would be my response.
Question over here. May I?
Yes, you may, Ruth. Please
you.
do.
Thank you, ma'am. So as usual, Mr. Watkins does a really great job of offering clarity in comments presented in a way that is very respectful and also gentle, and I appreciate that. I agree with every single comment he made on the document, and if I were a community member at a workshop and received this, my reaction would be pretty strong about the whole process because of the way some of the language is in here. So I would affirm what Mr. Watkins has said. Thank you.
Thank you, Ruth. Other comments? Dennis?
Yeah, not on that. Back to the point that Nancy said, she mentioned about the process at the workshops, and I don't want to get into micromanaging what the consultants are doing, but you did mention there's going to be breakouts. Is that correct?
There would be stations.
Or stations.
I think Jenna called it a World Cafe style, where you'd go around to different stations, like visiting the station and talking about the different topics.
So is there any kind of moderator at those stations, or is everybody pretty much on their own?
There would be a staff person who would be helping, yes, at each station, of course.
Okay,
Definitely.
okay, yeah, and I'm in favor of that. I support that. Thank you.
If I could add one thing to Chair Gardner, Steering Committee Chair Gardner's comment, we actually had our check-in with Dudek this morning, and they thought it was interesting and commented exactly in alignment with what Nancy said about Paul kind of workshopping it already, and that's the intent of this document, is to get a reaction and to kind of get different perspectives, and then collect all those perspectives based on what's presented, and then better inform what the eventual goal and policies will be. So what Mr. Watkins did in the comments related to this matter are exactly what we'd be looking for in terms of feedback. And if this was presented to you and you acted strongly, that would be noted as part of the workshop that these words are not good. So I think just again to sort of provide some clarification on the intention of this document, it's really to elicit feedback. And I think if there was a strong enough consensus to incorporate Committee Member Watkins' comments, then that is something we could definitely do. But I wanted to just share that this was all kind of brought forward as a nexus from the comments received as part of the phase 1, which is not only GPAC, but is also community feedback received online and at the pop-up events. So this is not something that has been put forward as necessarily needing to meet state law for certain word usage, but I think that there is an opportunity to soften where appropriate, but I think that that would be something to window with the community at the workshops.
I support what go ahead, Nancy.
Well, Susan has one too. How do the workshops in this schedule coordinate with the meetings with community organizations and associations and so forth? What's the order of that now? I've lost track of if it's the cart first or the dog first or the sorry.
So I guess talking more broadly about process, we would look to do workshops and any subcommittee meetings leading up to the workshops, if that was the desire of the GPAC. We will already be doing the vision statement subcommittee workshop or meeting in October as discussed. We will be taking these topics to the community. We envision taking the feedback received from the community members, compiling it and adjusting these as necessary, and then also taking the draft versions of the topics that are updated to reflect the community's input to stakeholder interviews, as well as Harbor Commission meetings, Parks, Beaches, Recreation Commission meetings, kind of sharing it out to get their reaction before bringing it back to the subcommittee for a final review as a draft.
So if I'm understanding that correctly, these workshops would happen, that information and feedback would be incorporated into the documents, and then it would go to the stakeholder groups and the commissions and committees. And there would be further feedback, which would then go back to the subcommittees. I think that's what Dennis was asking it for before, and I didn't understand how we were going to do this, so, okay.
There's a lot of moving pieces, but the intention is to give a lot of bites at the apple, so to speak, and
okay,
that's where I want to make
fine.
sure you're comfortable. Yes.
Want to make sure.
Thank you for the clarification.
Next.
Hi.
Virginia? Yes.
If we do take this language and soften it, then how are they going to introduce these things which may be necessary in order to save our beaches so that they won't be washed away completely and cost us lots of money? I mean, we'll continue to try to rebuild the beach every year with more sand, but if we have the dunes, maybe we won't have to spend as much money on doing that, and the beach will be, the places that they're at the beach is farther closer to the ocean. I don't know. Is there going to be experts there to talk about the environmental benefits of dunes or the things that are potentially going to be needed in order to save our beaches?
There would be people qualified to talk on the topics based on the topic of the evening. So if it's recreation, then I could envision having a member of the Recreation Senior Services Department there. If there's natural resources, then I would envision, DUDEC has a very extensive biological arm, so there would be qualified people there to talk about it. I don't think anyone would be there to push an agenda, but maybe to answer questions and then to discuss the importance of different components that are introduced through the topics. But I think, again, this is a good example of there are divergent opinions on certain topics, and it's good to collect that information to help inform a better document at the end of the day.
No, I just want to make sure that the discussion does happen and that we don't water it down enough, that it doesn't come up.
Thank you. Susan DeSantis for the minutes.
Well, two comments. One, for Virginia's benefit, there were background reports done, which she may not have the benefit of seeing, that would have gone into the topics that she's raising. So, okay. So, and they are on the website for Newport Together. So maybe, Ben, you can share with her how she can access those background reports from the consultant that have been out for a while. Not to prolong this conversation, but since you have the one slide summary for each of the topic areas, could you put up the one on land use so we can get an idea preliminarily of what you're thinking?
We don't have that yet. So we've got the two that are most pertinent in terms of November. December is when land use and harbor and bay and beaches and the other two that I'm blanking on right now would come forward. So nothing's been prepared yet. And I think there will be a draft coming my way by next week. We realize that land use is going to be a little different, and so I would look to set up subcommittee meetings with you before the November meeting on that as well. So working on a meeting in October for sure with the land use subcommittee.
Okay.
But nothing is prepared at this time.
All right, thank you.
One more quick one. I'm just
Nancy?
curious. Oh, I'm sorry.
No,
Sorry.
Go ahead, Ruth, and I'll.
Okay, thank you, Nancy.
Ruth, yes.
On this one, was this written by this one on the environmental one? Was this written by staff or consultants?
Which one is that? Do you have a page?
The one we
number?
just talked about, the ones that Paul commented. Was that Recreation and Natural Resources? Yeah. Was that written by staff or consultants? I'm just curious.
Everything was drafted by consultant, reviewed by staff. So they draft first
Okay.
as our consultant, we review it. But again, the intent of sharing a draft is to get these types of reactions.
Okay,
So
thank you.
Appreciate it.
Okay, Nancy?
I think it would be helpful for me, and I don't know, maybe others, if we had some kind of a calendar and that was presented and reviewed just briefly at every meeting, because I'm having trouble understanding the end goal and when we're going to cut this all off and how much time we have before that. And I know that the budget for the consultants is a part of that consideration, but it would be nice to know, are we wrapping this all up in 2025 and that's why we have these deadlines, or are we going on to 2028? I mean, it's all sort of nebulous right now.
Okay. Ben, can you clarify that?
So actually, I have a slide a little later on, but it's one that you've seen before. It just talks about the timing of everything. We do have an aggressive schedule. We're trying to keep on track for getting this to hearings in summer of next year. We think it's very doable as long as we can sort of maintain the cadence we've been having. And I would share that the intention is to have draft general plan update for full GPAC to look at in March of next year. So we are being very aggressive with the schedule. We're going to, as Chair Gardner has stated before, this committee has a considerable amount of work, and I think this is where the work is going to really start ramping up and having additional subcommittee meetings from your different staff liaisons you haven't seen for a while, as well as additional commission meetings, boards, committees, and commission meetings, and then ultimately putting a draft together for the GPAC to consider for community release. So all of that is coming into culmination, and again, hopefully the first quarter of next year by the end of it. That's what we're targeting, and we're tracking right now, but that slips. One thing that we've said is, although there is a budgetary and timing constraint from the contract perspective, this is not necessarily mandated to be done by summer of 25. So If the GPAC felt we needed to pump the brakes, we could certainly do so, but we would have to consider impacts on the budget and timing and making sure that doesn't jeopardize our contract.
Right. I'd just like to review that at each meeting because it feels like there are goals and deadlines that are behind all this, but I don't think we've talked about it yet tonight. So,
thank you.
Comments? Curtis?
Go ahead, Scott.
Oops, Scott?
So I kind of want to follow up Ruth's comments and then what Charles did with the vision comments and taking it back to subcommittee. That is one of our options tonight. So you've given us two options, two possible actions. One is to receive and file the attachment, and the other is to direct the responsible subcommittees to review the drafts. And it sounds like this has not been reviewed by the subcommittees at all. Is that correct?
That's correct. It's informed by the input, but these have not been reviewed by the subcommittees.
So I just want to point that out, that we have one of two actions, and the second action would be to send it back to subcommittee for their review with any comments that have surfaced this evening.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I think my comment
Curtis?
for
Yes.
kind of knowing the framework of the feedback session, given that it's on like high level goals, I think most of the feedback that people have provided, which I think is very good feedback, most of it's at the policy level, and I think the goals are broad enough that feedback at this stage probably doesn't require more review with a fine comb. As long as we have the ability to provide feedback as a subcommittee later, I feel comfortable supporting the workshops, and it feels like it's really trying to solicit like high level feedback, not at the nuance level of some of these drafts where we probably do need to go through with a finer tooth comb. And it sounds like that could be done beyond the feedback process, which I think sounds like a good order of operations in my view.
It's nice to hear that. Thank you. Okay. Mr. Mosher.
Yeah.
Did you need to respond?
First to that point, as I understand it, there will be only one workshop on each topic. So if the subcommittee wanted feedback on something, kind of the only opportunity to solicit that input is in these goals and these goal topics that will be presented at the workshop. So as seems to be usual with me, I do see some merit in the individual subcommittees reviewing these to make sure that they're getting the input that they want. And then the second comment I was going to make, or will make, is Committee Member Watkins expressed some concern about what the public was going to be seeing and the language they were going to be seeing before the workshop. Is the intent that material will actually be posted before it, or this will be presented in some kind of a presentation at the workshop? I generally would be in favor of posting informative information before it, but this may be a case where that explanation of what the material is intended for would be better presented kind of cold at the meeting, or if it is posted in advance, that it carefully explain, as Nancy Gardner did, that these are not necessarily ideas endorsed by the GPAC, but the GPAC is soliciting input on them. So would it be the intention to post the material ahead of the workshop or bring it up kind of live there for reactions?
Have I misunderstood the minutes, Ben? The last minutes, and I was not here, is that the committee decided to let Dudek go ahead and do this.
That was for the vision statement. That was not for
the
this.
other.
Yes. So
Okay.
this was attempting to bring these to the full GPAC, and as Committee Member Laidlaw noted, you do have the option to send these back through the various subcommittees for additional input prior to sharing. But to Mr. Mosher's point or comment, I don't believe the intention is to share these in advance of the workshop. It was more to share them at the workshop with the proper context and framing to get the feedback that we are looking for, and that's just valuable high-level feedback, as Committee Member Black put it very appropriately, that this is not, again, intended to get into the weeds on the various policy and goal components, rather broad high-level feedback to help us inform these goal topics and policy action ideas a little bit better for further refinement throughout the process at the subcommittee level later down the line. So that is the goal or the intent of staff this evening, is to hopefully share some iteration of this document at the workshop for feedback. If the committee voted to send it back to each subcommittee, we'd certainly arrange to do that. We would have to do so again quickly in October and then bring it back at your November meeting.
Okay. Nancy? Oops.
I don't know.
Susan, Nancy, Dennis. Okay, Susan, and then we'll hopefully move forward.
I was going to support what Curtis had to say earlier, and for the format that is being proposed, that these goal topic areas are broad enough that the framework that you're proposing for the workshops will solicit the kind of feedback we're looking for from the community, that we don't need to wordsmith these. And I guess the question I have is whether or not the GPAC members will be participating in these workshops. I would anticipate that they will, and that they will have the opportunity to be able to provide input on the details during the workshop process.
Yeah, these are community workshops. You're all part of the community, so obviously the intent, if you wanted to be there and participate, you absolutely could.
And Nancy, you had a comment, and then Dennis had a comment, so let's...
Yeah, I just want to clarify something. We have, as Jim pointed out, one workshop on natural resources and recreation. If that is not well attended and we don't get much feedback, do we have a backup plan? I would hate to think that we're going to offer this at November 13th, which is pretty close after the election. People are winded right now from everything that's going on. And suppose we get 10 community members at that workshop. That can't possibly be the end of it. I mean, I just want to make sure that we're really reaching out and we do get some level of comfort that people are aware of what we've been working on and that they've had a chance to comment on it.
Ben?
I would envision this being a multi-pronged approach where we are having the workshop while also having online engagement as well being a component. And we've had a lot of success with that on the website through the City Manager's Week in Review being cross-posted on Stu News, and that drives traffic to the website. We've gotten a lot of good interactions from the community on that. So I would envision that the workshop is not the end of it. It's that the website is augmented to create something that complements the workshop and furthers it for people who couldn't attend. I realize these are not desirably near the best dates, but I think keeping the November workshops to the first half of the month and the December workshops to the first week, we're doing the best we can without delaying to the new year.
Okay, well, that's fine. I just, I would like to make sure that it's on record that we do need to have a fair amount of input, and maybe that goes back to the Natural Resources Committee, Subcommittee, and the Recreation. Well, I guess they're combined right now. And if that committee feels that we don't have enough input, including the website and all the other input, that we somehow revisit this, because I'm concerned that we're making a lot of decisions here, and I want to make sure that the community has really thought about this.
But just remember that when we were going through the first phase of it, we had a number of workshops on which a lot of this is based, and we got maybe 20 people in most of them. And they were saying 10 people at a lot of them. So I don't think we can expect necessarily to say, oh, we're going to get 100 people, and if we don't get 100 people, the process is flawed. We still will have going to council and having all of that where you tend to get more attention to have more input and that sort of thing, as well as the online and that sort of thing. So I wouldn't be overly concerned. We'll do our best to publicize it and everything, but I don't think that means we have to have several more that may get the same 10 people or something.
Dennis? Thank you,
So
Nancy.
I'm assured by your comment that there would be a context depending on the situation, I like to get information out before meetings. Like when we have our meetings here, obviously, we want to have some idea what we're coming into. What I would worry about in these is that there are a couple things that might trigger some reactions, as Paul has pointed out, some of these things. The last thing I want to do is have something get out on Nextdoor. Being involved with an organization who brings people out, I would hate to see that people attend this with an agenda in mind. Otherwise, so I think it is important to present what is going to be discussed and what's going to happen at these workshops, where they can be put into context and can be made very clear, to the point you've made over and over again very well tonight, that these are to stimulate discussion. These are not, we're not putting them out here. I don't want to see people show up with the pitchforks. Maybe I'm a little paranoid, but I like that, and I hope there's no change in that. That's what I'm saying. I want it to stay, no, we don't put the information out ahead of time. They are presented with what's going on at the workshop in context.
Thank you, Dennis. Charles?
Yes, I'd like to move staff recommendation on this item 3B.
Okay, wait a moment.
Direct the responsible subcommittee to review the drafts for additional input prior to release for public review at the workshops.
Second.
Who seconded that? Dennis, okay. All in favor? Or before, wait a moment. I called for the vote before. Are we done with comments?
Do you understand? Does everybody
Yes.
understand what the
Yes.
motion was? Charles, do you want to repeat that, please?
Yes. My motion is to direct the responsible subcommittee to review the drafts for additional input prior to release for public review at the workshops.
Okay.
Can I ask for a clarification real quick on that? Because it's coastal resilience, is that okay to have safety be the prime reviewer for that, or do you want to bring in harbor and bay and beaches again? And that would be another subcommittee.
I mainly want to consider Paul's comments because we haven't
too.
reviewed these. We saw the draft and we haven't talked about it, so I want to review Paul's comments.
Right, and that's why I'm asking if there are any other comments, because we're definitely moving ahead here, and we can move ahead. And I would ask that we amend that motion to include, Paul's comments and how this material, because there's a lot of support for that in the community. I think that it helps us communicate with the people in the community.
So
Many
amended.
of those people will not understand the more technical terms that Paul refers to as Sacramento-ish. So we want to communicate with our community and not waste the workshop. So I think we should include those comments.
I agree.
Okay, so we have a motion on the table, and anything further before we call for the vote? With the amendment that Paul's comments be added. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Curtis Black. Okay. And Lori Williams. Okay. And Susan DeSantis.
In the interest of getting these done, I know how difficult it is to put the subcommittee meetings together because you all have different times and schedules. And I would suggest you have one, at the most 2 dates, and if people can't do it, you just can't do it, because otherwise you're going to be in December trying to get 6 or 7 people that say, oh yeah, I can make that date. So let's be real crisp about it, and if you can't make it, you send in your comments for review, and you don't get your nose out of joint because you couldn't make the meeting.
I agree with Nancy on that, and I think we should do that.
I'd offer that if the dates could include a Zoom-only option, because you're probably going to do it quick, this probably can be covered in
I
Zoom
think that would be a
only.
nice idea, so we could maybe not lose anyone in the process like we did with the vision statement. Some people just didn't return those emails. Okay, all right. So Zoom meeting, we're going to take option B. We've all voted. We know who opposed, and we're done with this. Okay. Present overview of upcoming deliverables and objectives.
All right, I'll be very brief. Thank you all for staying till the end of the meeting, or close to the end. So just wanted to, this is kind of talking to what Committee Member Scarborough had brought up about the timeline. I'm just showing this again. We showed it last time. but we are looking to maintain some semblance of a schedule, putting us into summer of 25 for hearings. So looking to really start getting into development of potential goals and policies throughout the end of this year. I would say that the first block should be really through winter of 24, and then continue to refine the policy and action development, and then ultimately filter through the subcommittees and come back with a full general plan update for review in the end of the first quarter of next year, which again, aggressive, and we can slow down if we need to.
Is this on our website or somewhere where we can see it? Because I don't remember this from month to month to month. I need it in front of me. Sorry.
Fair enough. I could actually post the slide as well as the updated full Microsoft project schedule if that's of interest. I mean, I have no problem doing that.
I don't need the full schedule, just that.
Okay.
Just send that out.
Will do.
Thank you.
Thank you for the comment. That's okay. I'll send it out. Thank you.
Yeah. When
Nancy.
you do that, can you explain what the colors mean?
The color. Oh, in the full.
Because I was trying to find this from the last meeting. I looked at the video, and all I could see was this. And I had the impression that Dudek was going to post the review in early February, but I didn't know what the striped purple means or the yellow. And
I don't either
think
without
maybe
the
the
full
green with the
context.
dot is when they're going to do that. And I think, share Nancy Scarborough's concern. Is the GPAC expected to, we usually have our meeting on the first Wednesday of the month. Are we expected to meet in January? Because if not, if we're not meeting in December, there's like 2 meetings before the entire updated general plan is posted for public review. That doesn't seem realistic to me. We have a meeting in November and February, and the whole thing is updated. How is that? I don't understand how it's going to work.
And that's where I was saying I think work will ramp up for the committee in terms of maybe needing to have additional meetings if necessary. And again, the December going dark was just a suggestion. We can talk about it further at the November meeting based on what we feel at that point in time. But we could potentially have 2 meetings in January, 2 meetings in February if necessary. But the intent would still be to hold a regular cadence of meetings in January and February, and then meet more frequently as needed.
The entire revised general plan, if I'm understanding, is maybe the green thing with a dot on it, March 17th?
Yeah, I don't know off the top of my head. I don't have the full schedule available. I'm looking at the same slide. So I could post the whole schedule, as I said, along with the slide for review. But again, this is a goal, and we can always move it as needed.
Yeah, but again, knowing what the colors mean would be very helpful.
Understood. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. All right.
And then just lastly, kind of recapping, we've got some additional next steps that are not on this slide, but we'll be scheduling a vision statement subcommittee meeting to go over the vision statement along with the comments that were received. And again, I really appreciate the lively discussion on that. We'll look at revisiting that and bringing it back to the GPAC at your November meeting. We'll also conduct safety element subcommittee meeting as well as natural resources and recreation subcommittee meeting to go over the goal topics and policy ideas. So those will be arranged in October, as well as likely a noise subcommittee meeting to talk about the scope. So a very active month of October for staff and the GPAC. And then further, as mentioned, it sounds like we have general buy-in on the dates for the workshop. So we would look to coordinate through the outreach subcommittee. If there are any advertising materials, we'll be sending those to the outreach subcommittee, and we'll be getting those out to start advertising for the workshops to ensure we get the best turnout that we possibly can. And as mentioned, we'll be working to do a similar draft for the land use in harbor and bay and beaches areas, as well as arts and culture and historical resources. I know noise is not on there, but they're not under scope yet, so we'll figure that out. But those are our next steps. So again, very busy. Appreciate all your input. And just emphasizing again that I'm always a phone call away if you have questions. You don't have to wait till these meetings if you want to bring something up. I'm happy to talk outside of these meetings. That's all that I have, and I turn it back to the chair.
We ask that you try, if you have input for the meeting, if you could get it in a little earlier, that would be great, because everyone would have an opportunity to review it. I've had a few comments from members of the committee asking for the material a little bit earlier. Paul, you submitted your material on the 28th rather than the 1st, so it would be nice to have it a little earlier so that everyone can digest it and we're not surprised in our meetings. Okay, thank you. Committee announcements or matters which members would like placed on a future agenda for discussion, action, or report. These are non-discussion items. Anything? Okay.
Just a
Curtis?
few things. One is that I mentioned last meeting that we're on the Harbor Commission agenda to go over like an overview of the general plan, all the goals and policies that touch Harbor Commission, and to solicit feedback, and that's next Wednesday if any of y'all want to come at 5. And we've already kind of gone through a subcommittee on water quality coastal tidelands. And we'll review that in tomorrow's committee meeting at water quality. I think the only thing that would be interesting on a future agenda, I know there's been like a lot of outreach going on. I think there's been, you mentioned like people engaging with the website. We've been getting kind of like tidbits of feedback through the lens of different policies and goals that have come through. But it'd be interesting to get like an overview of like what's come in through outreach and how many touch points we have and like themes that have emerged that were surprising. Like even just kind of like the raw data of how many touch points we have to get a briefing there would be interesting too.
Okay. More outreach material in the meetings from staff.
And it could be quick, like, you know, what have people submitted through the website, surveys, 5 minutes even would be kind of interesting.
Be happy to do that. And then just clarification for the Tony Petros item. Chair Gardner, you mentioned that if people had specific questions to send those your way so you can help with the moderation. Is that correct?
Yes, but Tony's also going to send a resume of what he's going to be talking about. So why don't we wait for that? I'll send it to you, send it out to the members, and then you can all send me your questions that you want to have addressed.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Anything else?
One
Okay.
question.
Yes,
Maybe
Scott?
I just missed this. Did we approve the workshop dates then? Was that something that we needed to do?
That's our goal.
That was part of no one objected to the dates, so I took that as we're good with
And
those
was there a
dates.
time with those dates?
We haven't nailed down a time yet, but it'd be in the evening when people could attend, so largely probably 5:30 or 6, maybe at the latest.
Could you notify the members of the subcommittees of those dates specifically in an email so that they're aware that that is happening on that date at that time?
Sure.
So it gets on their calendar. Because I do think it would be important for the subcommittees to attend all of those, since we have the background of how we got from A to B.
And now that we've brought it to the full GPAC and you're aware of it, we'll definitely start moving and getting those dates on the calendar. So thank you for that.
Okay, and if we can let people know who were not here today, what's happening in some of the changes that we've made.
I'll send out a recap tomorrow or Friday at the latest.
Thank you, Ben. Thanks so much. Okay, a motion to adjourn? All right, good. We're adjourned.